Cybercriminals are using social engineering, loaded with urgency and fear, to successfully prey on victims, your employees, or your customers. Protect your Office 365 email from today's most sophisticated attacks with Barracuda Email Threat Scanner. It's a free tool to help protect your business from these hard-to-detect attacks. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner uses artificial intelligence to hunt and eliminate Office 365 email threats. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email right now. Get your free email threat scan at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you have a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, you can do that and submit your suggestions for guests or topics by visiting securityweekly.com/guest. Complete that form, and we review those on a regular basis. On to the security news for this week. Where did you guys want to start? Lots of good news this week.
Oh my gosh, Paul, you had me being gone for a couple weeks made me forget a couple stories and forget to add them and remember whether we had covered them and didn't know whether you'd covered them. So you got a bunch in there that like, oh shit, I figured you would have covered that already. Like the RSA hack?
Yeah, so that was one I didn't read because it was too long.
Okay, I read it.
Oh, good. See, this is why we all make such a great team.
And it's been a couple of days, and I read it in the middle of lunch during teaching class last week, which was amazing, and I had a amazing bunch of students.
What story number was this?
That is your story number 23. The full story of the RSA hack can finally be told with RSA at Wired, rather. Effectively, this one, what is it? The non-disclosure agreement that all of the folks at RSA and folks signed that worked this particular incident at RSA has expired.
This was the secure ID token
This
hack.
is the secure ID, which we covered on the show 10 years ago.
Was it 10 years ago?
It was, because the non-disclosure was a 10-year limit. And they talk about effectively what happened when hackers broke in and stole all of the RSA seeds that had been delivered to customers, which was on an air-gapped network. But turns out it wasn't really on an air-gapped network.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah. So it wasn't really...
So the operative question is, define air-gapped.
Yeah, there was this one connection, and I don't remember how they said it.
The Ethernet cable was suspended in the air, so it was air-gapped.
Yeah, and I really forget how they said it, but they went into total panic mode to the point like they put butcher paper over everybody's windows to prevent people from listening with lasers, and
that's interesting. I used it to wrap my briskets, but
exactly. Oh, so, all right, here we go. RSA executive told me that part of their network responsible for manufacturing the security hardware tokens was protected by an air gap, a total disconnection of computers from any machine that touches the internet. But in fact, Leatham says one server on RSA's internet-connected network was linked through a firewall that allowed no other connections to the seed warehouse on the manufacturing side. Every 15 minutes, that server would pull off a certain number of seeds so that they could be encrypted, written to a CD, and given to secure ID customers. That link was necessary. It allowed RSA's business side to help customers set up their own server that could check users' 6-digit codes. Even after the CD was shipped to a client, those seeds remained on the seed warehouse server as a backup if the customer's secure ID or server or a setup CD were somehow corrupted. Now, instead of the once every 15-minute connections, Leatham saw logs of thousands of continuous requests for data every second. Wah, wah, wah. Yeah. So ultimately, this was arguably one of the first cybersecurity supply chain attacks that were ever seen.
First major ones with a vendor, I would say.
Yep. But they couldn't say anything for 10 years.
I can't wait to read the article again. I just didn't get to it this week. So
a great example of it's all in the implementation.
Yes.
Right. There's math and then there's implementation.
So true.
So true.
It's what bites you most of the time when it comes to cryptography, is that key, or in this case, seed management. Yeah.
Yep.
And usability too, right? Like, I think Tyler and lots of us can tell you, it's the, like, I want it encrypted, but I also don't trust myself, so I'm going to put that key or that password somewhere else, right? And that somewhere else has to have a really high level of security, though, I mean, depending on what you're protecting, right? And and I think we go the other way. Like Tyler says, and I believe this is true. I want to say that it's not true because I feel bad for him, but he has is it an encrypted key, a USB key?
No, it's just a USB key he can't find.
With like $1 million or plus dollars of Bitcoin.
Yep.
Oops.
Whoops.
Yep.
That would suck.
We volunteered to go to his house and help him find it for a small finder's fee of $1 million.
And
We literally will fly there.
the sad part is, I will not reveal said friend's name, but I have a friend, and that actually went to his house
Oh.
to help him find it. I don't know what the results were.
Well, I spoke with Tyler today, and he was still working. So my guess is no, still hasn't found
Yep.
it.
But,
He was still working.
Still looking.
let's put it this way: when the conversation with that friend didn't realize the volume of Tyler's
Property.
museum,
Yes.
as it were.
I have not seen this museum. I must.
Not many people have.
Yeah, he's got like 10,000 square feet or something. 20.
No, 30.
Oh.
So Tyler,
Wow.
we're gonna
He's a freaky dude.
we'll dox Tyler a little
Let's
bit
dox
here.
Tyler right now. Let's do it.
Tyler
That's what he
bought
gets for not showing up.
Tyler bought a church, and he lives in a church. And the church part is his home that has been remodeled into a home, and they've added additional floors and so forth. And there's also the rectory and all of the basement, the parish. So the priest's living quarters.
Yep.
Which
That's
had,
the rectory.
Yep, which had been turned into apartments.
Yep.
And there's the basement where the basement is for the function rooms, which is my understanding is effectively Tyler's lab and museum, which is 30,000 square feet.
The basement is
30,000 square feet.
Wow, I didn't know he was nearly as freaky as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
That's
think he used the USB
fantastic.
thumb drive on a pen test? And it's on one of those cliche dropped it in the parking lot thing?
No. Tyler probably has 300,000 or 400,000, 400 or 1,000 USB thumb drives somewhere.
Well, his family owned like a printer repair place too.
Printing company.
Is that based in the same location?
Same town.
Yeah. So
Yeah, like
he's got a lot of stuff to go through.
he's a ton of stuff to go through, and has been able to acquire a ton of amazing gear over the years.
Because he has the place to store it.
You're right. And
Doesn't get when you have 30,000 square feet just in your basement. I would
All
totally
right,
store it.
we just need to start a conference. We're going to call it TylerCon.
Yes,
And
I agree. I like this idea a lot.
yeah,
A lot.
we are totally just going to descend on him with like 1,000 InfoSec geeks. It's like,
And then he's going to pwn all of us because any thumb drive we find, we're going to plug it into our laptops to see if it has Bitcoin on it.
you won't even need to do that. He'll opponent us 3 other ways before we walk in the door. Yeah, dude, the church has a bell tower. I mean, just saying.
This Tyler story reminds me of a story where someone had thrown out the hard drives into the dump. I think it was in the UK, right?
The dude in the UK threw the hard drive away, and it's got like like $10 million in Bitcoin on it, and he keeps trying to petition the dump to be able to go dig it up. Like, dude, you threw that away.
You're not going to find that.
It's been in the rain. It's been in the water. It's
I mean, it's certainly you could.
I don't know.
If he finds it, he'll have the money to do a microscope recovery of that disk platter.
It would be worth that investment. Yes.
Yep.
You know, it just makes you wonder how much is the percentage of Bitcoin capital that's actually been wasted, right? That's lost.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, and maybe even not lost, but you think about what the first Bitcoin transaction was. Like, we're totally getting off topic for the story, but who cares?
I love this. This is great. We're just talking.
The first Bitcoin transaction was a developer bought a pizza to be delivered for 10,000 Bitcoin.
Wow.
10,000. Wow.
If you think about what 10,000, even after the quote post Elon Musk on Saturday Night Live crash looks like, What's a Bitcoin worth right now?
To the Googles.
Johnny is chiming in the back room right now.
Yeah, I don't know. What is it? 40 grand?
Let's see.
Like that?
I will tell you. Yep. The
$35,852.10 to be precise.
So $38,000, and you paid 10,000 Bitcoin for pizza. That pizza now is worth $38 million.
Oh,
that was a tasty fucking pizza.
Right.
It better have been.
Yeah. But honestly, at that time,
right,
Bitcoin was worthless. Bitcoin was literally worthless.
But to Josh's point, right? There's a lot of Bitcoin just floating around out there that people are like, I don't know, like a couple of dollars.
I will shit you not. I was into mining Dogecoin and a few other coins, like Ron Paul coin. Like that was an actual thing, and it was a total joke, like Dogecoin. And just a couple weeks ago, I was literally tearing through some old hard drives to see if they had Dogecoin wallets that I hadn't expunged yet, because those were potentially worth thousands to $10,000s of dollars. Like, do you know what I found? Nothing.
Old porn.
It's not old if it's still good.
That's right. We call that vintage. It's vintage or classic.
Right.
Yes, classic.
The people in it stayed the same age.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, there was a lot of bush in that.
Anyway. Hey now. I'm not that old.
Oh boy!
So
I don't know how to follow that up.
To round off the RSA story.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, the initial Victor phishing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. And some of the results: supply chain attack. It's interesting. At the time, they confirmed that Lockheed Martin used the stolen RSID, the RSA breach to compromise their network. And then later, now after the 10 years have passed, those folks involved at RSA said, "Yeah, no, Lockheed Martin, that wasn't us."
Interesting.
Yeah.
There is an unpatchable vulnerability in Apple's new Mac chip. I have to say, I don't know what your guys' take on this was, but I wasn't really that impressed. Did you guys read this?
What's that?
The unpatchable vulnerability in Apple's chip?
Which one? What was the name of that vulnerability? It had a name, because they all do.
It's got a name and a website and a song, a dance, a logo.
Is this the
Miracles?
Miracles. This is Miracles.
M1 Rickles. Yeah, Miracles, right? I did not read this one. I saw that it got posted somewhere that I get some news from, and I didn't dive into it.
So there's rings for the kernel, and the hardware helps enforce the rings. And in ARM, EL0 is actually the user land ring, because of course it's backwards, flip your bits. The userland programs are able to access one register, but only certain parts of one register that happen at a lower ring, which is a higher number in ARM. EL3, I think, is the... And so they're able, userland programs can
interact
use
with
this
with a higher ring.
You communicate with other programs via these two registers in two parts of one of the registers in the hardware design.
Wow. So, it turns out that there's a reason that specialization actually occurred in the industry. Just saying. Anyway.
Are you saying this isn't your area of expertise, or Apple should not have specialized their chips and done their own thing?
I don't think Apple should have taken this venture. But... what's the practical exploitability? That story?
This is where I was at, Joff. Right? I don't think it's a huge deal. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like, remember we talked a lot about Rowhammer. It's like,
there's a new Rowhammer.
Great, we can do this, but what is the practical application? Like, it's same thing with TLS attacks. It's like I have to have 10,000 rounds of and then I can decrypt one character. that's not very practical.
Yeah.
I mean, practicality probably maps back to motivation on the adversary. So even if it's really tough, but you have an adversary that knows it's there and they're going to go through the trouble.
That's usually where these crop up,
and
right?
And have the ability to get around that time memory trade-off.
Yeah, like any exploit, right? They start off any level, whether it's CPU, microcode, software, whatever. It all starts off at, we break it by denial of service, and then it's like, okay, now what can we do?
Yeah, now it's the next step, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is this I didn't read the article, but is this an example where some decisions should have been made to put that in microcode, or is this a scenario where like performance just outweighed the risk and they had to optimize it in hardware?
User land programs do write to registers as a normal part of operation, from what I understand. Please correct me if I'm wrong, audience.
No, that's true.
No, of course.
And but there are certain registers that are in the protected ring that user land programs should never write to. However, this one, you can write to parts of it that can then other user land programs can read from. So it's a read.
It can be used as a conduit. It's a little bit like inter-process memory sharing. It can be used as a conduit to pass data. So it's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing, but again, the practicality of it all.
Yeah, and I'm trying to give some shout outs. I'm looking for some stuff here. Give me there we go. So we it's too bad Lee's not here in the updated version of the 617 class. Josh Wright put together an amazing challenge for us for some fuzzing. And Josh wrote a vulnerable version of host APD.
Mm-hmm.
And we compile it on ARM.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always we teach students how to do some fuzzing, to interact with GDB, to find where the crash happens, and so forth. But it's always one of those, like, for the extra challenge, see if you can get remote code execution. No one's ever done it. And a student...
and Josh put an RCE vulnerability in host APD?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, he put in a vulnerability that causes a crash.
Yeah, I gotcha.
To Joff's point, like the first step is the denial of service, the crash. And that's always like the open-ended challenge in that lab is like get remote code execution. Like you're going to have to know ARM assembly and a whole bunch of other stuff to make that happen. You're probably not going to do that in your SAMS class.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing.
And a gentleman, Felix Schalik, wrote to a bunch of us at SANS and said, hey, by the way, here's your remote code execution.
Wow.
For that lab.
Damn.
Like, God damn. So we're going to start including that as part of the solutions to that lab, like the above and beyond solutions, and giving Felix total credit for that, because like
that's amazing.
As the instructors, we hadn't even gone that deep with it. And we had only surmised it was possible.
Right.
And he made the quote possible happen. Like, to Joff's point, you got to start with a denial of service and then you can go from there.
See, but this is what scares me about risk decisions that we make, because I believe, being in this industry as long as I have, that there is always a Felix or two or more out there that, like you said, that would make the impossible impossible. Like there could not be an exploit for that vulnerability, any vulnerability. There could be like a really crappy proof of concept that just causes a crash. Everyone goes, yeah, like I'll patch that when I get to it, based on the fact that one, there either is no exploit, or two, the exploits that are out there are really just denial of service. Therefore, I'm going to prioritize it lower. Like I don't agree with that approach because of people like Felix.
Yep.
People like Felix, you just have to assume have gotten some base level of access anyways.
Yeah. And Joff, I'm going to let you comment here. The email from Felix said, talking about some ROP chains and stuff that he did. Where is his comment here? It was basically like, hey, I just learned this stuff on ARM, so my knowledge of ARM ROP chains is about a couple of hours old. I apologize if the code is sloppy. Like,
that's perfect, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a perfect illustration of what can happen, right? It just takes some intellect to apply. So that denial of service thing, that very first crack in the door is should be enough for us to say, okay, we have a serious problem.
Yep.
Because, once exploitable, even just to crash the machine, the next step is going to follow inevitably, right? We're going to go to that next step.
Yeah, and we saw that with a Windows exploit a couple of years ago, and there was even a website that was out there, and I can't remember the CVE, and it was like CVE blah 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 something status, and it was a denial of service attack, and it was one that a lot of folks surmised could be turned into remote code execution and wormable. And there was like a web page out there, status, like, is it wormable yet, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And nope, from the best of my knowledge, it never happened.
If the reason for the crash is because you're executing memory in a spot you're not supposed to be executing memory, there's a good chance that you can exploit it later, right?
Yep.
There was
Just a matter of time.
Another vulnerability in macOS. There were some 0 days apparently that allowed attackers to bypass privacy features and take screenshots from the webcam. JAMF, is that how do you say JAMF or JAMP?
JAMF. I call it JAMF.
I don't even know.
JAMP, it's not one that rolls off the tongue for me.
JAMF.
JAMP researchers said the malware controls legit applications that can capture screen records or screenshots without requiring user consent as soon as it infects the device. Don't they call it Zoom? I guess you do.
Wow.
Oh, man. Shots fired. I love it.
I mean, this is recent code, right? Because it's recently that Apple put that check in there and actually enabled those permissions. And Zoom is an example where you have to go in and give it permissions to actually be able to do the screen record.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't know. Capturing the screen could yield some results, but it's very opportunistic. It's also, getting footage from someone's webcam is more of a privacy violation than what we traditionally talk about as a breach of some kind, right? It's a breach of privacy.
Could they do it without turning on the light that indicates that the camera's on?
There used to be a interpreter module that could do that without turning on the light.
Was there?
This was like pre-Mac. This was OS 10, OS X days.
To me, that's a great example of where that should just be a hardware thing. If the camera has power, the light has power. Take that out of software, right? Like that control to me was just implemented wrong.
Does the light only come on if the camera's active?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that has to be software, like if software is accessing it.
Yep. And now that runs into the question about how much of the software you use on your OS that might not use the internal built-in camera.
Yep.
Like, I don't use an internal camera at my day job, and it has a light.
Because usually they're 720p.
Right. Like the Logitech C922 type of stuff I've got on a mount.
Same
Just
on Paul's
like
laptop.
this.
Paul's got an amazing laptop. I eventually guess that's a 1080p built-in webcam.
Probably, but still a bad camera.
Yeah, still bad camera.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. He's probably got a really bad webcam, but he's got so many monitors.
Right.
It is a bad webcam, I will say. I don't care if it's 1080p or 720. Either way, it's bad. The webcam quality.
Yeah. And then it depends on software too.
It's like sensor,
Don't try and change that in Microsoft Teams because you'll just end up on the support request on Microsoft. That's like, people are asking for that and they don't give it to them.
Yeah.
And don't even bother looking it up on Linux because you can't change it.
And somewhat, that was one of the things that was kind of shocking to me last week. When I teach for SANS, I don't normally have the camera on except for a little bit of introduction every day and that type of stuff. But I was asked if I could keep the camera on all week. So I did. And one of the things that I noticed is that, like, whenever I do podcast, Zoom, Google Meet, you name it, the focus is always really good. Pretty good. Like, stays in focus. Even with moving around and Italian hand gestures and those types of things. But with Go to Training platform for SANS, like the focus was constantly in and out all the time. And I was like,
it's application dependent.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the options that you had for adjusting the camera in Go to Training were potato or not potato. Potato or not potato. Right?
Yeah, so when I do virtual training these days, I actually will tell people, it's like, look, I'm going to be on camera for the introduction and to say hello, and then I'm just going to turn it off because it's just it's difficult otherwise.
We're totally off. Like,
Well, now if you have this vulnerability, I can turn it back on for you.
yeah, I mean, please do, because you know
thanks,
what?
Paul.
I had a great week with the camera on, and I just put it behind all my slides, and I wasn't even self-conscious to know that I was on camera. I just had to remember not to pick my nose,
Yeah.
and
This you know.
and I probably even forgot. It was still good.
And screenshots were taken.
Dude, I used to run back in the day of Jenny Cam. We used to have an apartment that had cameras in every room, and I still somewhere have pictures. There was a camera at my desk at work, and I have one of my coworkers who grabbed a screenshot of me like going for the digger at my desk.
Stuff happens.
It does.
Stuff
Like
happens.
life. Like you got to pick your nose every once in a while.
That's, a great title for this episode, I guess.
You got to pick your nose every once in a while.
Sometimes you got to go digging for gold, whether that be Bitcoin wallets or
Picking your nose. Picking your nose.
Keeping it real. Hey, one of the stories that actually stuck out to me was the VMware critical emergency patch, vCenter.
You guys are picking all the stories I didn't really read all that well.
Yeah, look,
Well, maybe
I
you
did.
should cut quantity versus quality.
Yeah,
Paul.
I know. That's the thing.
Yeah, look. I'll admit I didn't read into it a lot. But
Joff, which story was this?
Oh, so Joff just read the headline and expected the rest of us to read the story.
Joff, which story
yeah,
was this?
pretty much. Yeah. This is story number. Hold on. I get that. Get. Oh, crap.
17.
Now. Yeah, thank you.
16 and 17.
16, 17.
Okay. Yep.
Anyway,
VMware vCenter,
what caught my attention was just really the idea that whenever I'm on a pen test, the last thing that is patched is always VMware.
Yeah, that's
right?
a good point.
Because organizations are like deadly afraid of dealing with patching VMware because it's holding up the rest of their infrastructure normally, right? It's like, oh my God, I can't patch vCenter, I can't patch I especially can't patch ESXi because holy shit, I got to take down like 40 servers, so it is not unusual when you're vulnerability scanning inside of an organization to find all kinds of VMware.
You know what else? You know what else you should look for? And I'm guilty of this. Apache Guacamole.
Apache
Very
Guacamole.
Similar, right? It's the access to all the systems, and I'm like, if I screw that up, I'm going to lose access to all my systems.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing. Right?
And Joff, the concept of the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I will fully admit that a system that I retired not 6 months ago
wasn't fully patched and up to date in running VMware, Larry?
Yep. Because it ran so many systems that I was reliant on. And turns over time, I became less and less reliant on those systems. And in fact, there are systems that I probably still really need to have up, but aren't up, and I just have to have time to migrate them. Running ESXi 5.
Yeah, point illustrated, right? And I admit it too.
The nice part is when it's us, we can go, oh, that was just a honeypot.
Yeah.
We're researching something.
Yeah, I would left it vulnerable on purpose for research purposes.
It was a honey.
That I'm about to write on it, right?
It was a honeypot with no instrumentation in front of it.
That's right. I was testing a theory.
To me, we always talk about if you have physical access to something, you can't really secure it, right? It's game over at that point.
Yeah.
And in this scenario, right, owning that system is like getting
Physical access.
Mm-hmm.
And when I used to do pen testing, absolutely, that'd be the last thing patched, and we'd get access, and we'd say, all right, well, which system do we want to then have physical access to? And then we'd own that system too.
Yep. Speaking of which, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but the author of this article I see come up over and over again, Dan Gooden.
Dan Gooden's a epic.
He would probably be an amazing guest to have on the show.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, go patch your VMware vCenter stuff. And I was reading it and looking at it, and I'm like, one of the ones that the big deal was that it's the vSAN stuff. The vSAN health check plugin. I'm like, I don't do vSAN stuff on my which is enabled by default.
By default.
Yeah,
never mind.
And then you read that one line. That one line. Enabled by default.
Fuck.
Because support tickets, that's why.
Yep.
They want less of those.
Yep. All right.
There was a couple, speaking of the RSA hack we discussed earlier, there was two stories in here. that were chronicling big breaches: the Colonial Pipeline ransomware and SolarWinds. The SolarWinds one is interesting. There's a couple of angles on this one. So the SolarWinds CEO was a keynote at RSA last week.
Yep, that was last week. Yep.
So there was two things that the headline caught my attention. They did a good job with the headline, actually, because the CEO revealed that the timeline, the hack happened much earlier. So when they looked back, they saw the very early reconnaissance activities happening in January of 2019. Shows there was a lot of planning and well, I mean, that doesn't say there was necessarily planning, but there was the beginnings of the idea in 2019. It's tough to say with any certainty that they had planned this and then started to do the reconnaissance in 2019, or they started doing the reconnaissance and was like, oh, there's some interesting stuff there. Like, how could we take advantage of this? Not sure how that played out. So that was interesting. But also, I guess during the congressional hearings, which I didn't watch, I probably should have, that they blamed the intern. Like, the whole thing was blamed on an intern.
Oh man, that is not nice.
There's some backpedaling by the CEO. He was like, what happened at the congressional hearings where we attributed it to an intern was not appropriate and was not what we are about, or is not what we are about, or is not what we are about. He said, we have learned from that, and I want to reset it here by saying that we are a very safe environment and we want to attract and retain the best talent. I read that as backpedaling.
Is that like saying what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas?
But this time it didn't stay there, and we're totally sorry.
Yeah.
And we took our medicine, and everything's okay now.
We were testifying in front of Congress. It sounded like a good idea to blame the intern.
And we swear we didn't touch that intern inappropriately.
We thought it was off the record, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's Congress, so they bought it, right? I mean, that's a given. Yeah, that's a shame. Anyway, stuff happens.
The Colonial Pipeline ransomware hackers had a secret weapon, the self-promoting cybersecurity firm. Did we talk about this story already or not?
I wasn't here for 2 weeks, so I don't know, but I think there were some interesting stuff.
I can't remember if I talked about the show or somewhere else. That's my only...
Talk about it. Who cares? Because if they missed the last...
Bitdefender publicized its tool alerting... Bitdefender alerted DarkSide to the lapse, which involved reusing the same digital key to unlock multiple victims. The next day, DarkSide had seen that and said they had repaired the problem and that new companies have nothing to hope for, and then went on and hacked the Colonial Pipeline.
Oh, man.
So Bitdefender publicized that you could recover the key. I wasn't sure of the technical details. Apparently, there were other researchers that came to the same conclusion.
But
it was like,
published it.
Yeah, we're not publishing that because then DarkSide's going to know and they're going to fix it.
So what's the answer there? Because
responsible disclosure, whether doesn't matter what it is, even if it's evil attacker code and attacker groups, we have to disclose this responsibly. Hey, DarkSide, you've got a vulnerability in the way you're encrypting stuff. You should really fix that. Yeah, no.
That's a double-edged sword, right? The other one is they could have said, "Hey, we found out some issues, and we can provide decryption codes. Just reach out." But then that starts to seem like ambulance chasing. Oh, if you want the discount, that code, it's going to be. They're saying Bitcoin. We're just saying $10. They should have said, "We'll give it to you. We'll provide a solution to you for free." They could have been very cagey about it, and.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. How do you do the information sharing?
Yeah.
This is probably one where government is the right answer, right? FBI is probably the right answer. Mm-hmm. Law enforcement in some case to give it to the victim.
And vet the victim. Because if I was DarkSide, I'd be like, oh, yeah, totally. I want to know the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can only compartmentalize that information for so long.
Yeah.
I feel like it could have helped more people rather than just putting it on a blog post. Because all that does is help the attacker.
It's good marketing, though.
It is good marketing because we're using the word Bitdefender a lot. Yeah. I don't know. That's a tricky one.
Yeah. The pipeline one had some interesting things, back to our discussions with...
they got ransomware, right?
With some legislation And I think it was something that Lee posted in Slack about basically there was some legislation that is now saying, oh, hell, you run a pipeline, you should do cybersecurity. Like,
Yeah.
Yup. Like, it was a little bit of along the lines of too little, too late, but better than not at all. And I'm not seeing it back there.
Yeah, but I hear these stories have interesting twists and turns.
Really?
Sorry, that was a terrible joke.
Is that a pipeline joke?
Oh, God.
Jeez.
You're really milking this one, huh? One of the interesting takeaways, sorry if I forget if it was talked about on the show, is that
You don't watch every episode?
not every. I'm an audio person, so I listen. Is that okay?
That's okay. Do you listen to every episode? Maybe not every. You can be honest.
Of course
it's all right.
not. Sorry.
Wait, you're supposed to listen to these?
I stopped listening to every episode when you started having multiple different episodes beyond Security Weekly, right?
It's a lot of content.
Enterprise Security Weekly. Mm-hmm. It became a lot.
It's a really big pipeline.
It's a big pipeline. I need some type of canon on just Security Weekly in general.
That's true.
Which ones are the must listen to?
All of them. Anyway, continue.
So even with an air gap, right, it's a good lesson in, hey, what other systems are critical to your operations? So you could have something that's critical to your critical data, but you could still be in trouble if your operations are separate and hindered.
I've been harping on that point a lot lately, Paul, because we talk a lot about data security. And I feel like this was the transition from PCI to ransomware, where with PCI, it was about data security because we had to protect the card data. And we really, and rightfully so, we get hung up on data security. I have to protect my private information of my customers, employees, things of that nature. However, operations is still really important. And that's not about data. That's about keeping the business running. And disrupting that is what they're going after now. Because I think largely the focus was, keep people out and keep my data safe, not keep my business running.
Back to availability.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the one that I find interesting about the whole pipeline deal, and that we're hearing rumors, and I haven't been able to necessarily confirm and so forth, but they very much could have kept the pipeline operational from the OT side. It was the fact that their IT side that manages billing got hacked, and they couldn't determine how much that they were delivering over the pipeline to bill for it.
Wouldn't that mean that there's data coming at least out of the OT environment into the IT environment,
a data diode in that environment is absolutely the case. And the data could have been being sent to a system that couldn't receive it.
Yes. And what you mean by diode is like
one way.
Waterfall security makes that's one example of making a diode, right?
One way only.
Which I think is some like really cool technology.
Yep. And you can do a diode in software, you can do a diode in hardware, and you
they do it in hardware, which is really
which
awesome.
is crazy.
You can clip an Ethernet wire.
Yeah.
Literally can.
Yep. Now,
like USB too, you can clip the data ends and just have it do power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll never forget sitting in Sec 503 with Mike Poor, and we always blame Mike Poor, right?
Always.
This was about 2006, so this is a while ago. And Mike said, "Yeah, I got a syslog server." He's like, "Just plug in the Ethernet cable and cut the transmit wire so that it can only receive data. It's a syslog server that just logs, right? Mm-hmm. Go log into the server from the freaking console. You don't need to SSH to the server, right? Yep. All it is a log bucket.
Yep.
It's a good concept.
The thing that I think that is really terrifying about this is that the pipeline deal, the reason they shut the operational side, the OT side down, was because the IT wasn't functioning and they couldn't accurately bill.
That makes sense, though.
It does, but to prevent panic and from people to stop pumping gasoline into trash bags and laundry baskets.
with holes in them.
Yeah, like you
saw
could
that meme too.
Yeah, you could have prevented this large scale hoarding panic thing by working with the authorities, basically. And I hate to say this, just to cover it up. Seriously, if you had just continued to let fuel flow through the pipeline, you probably could, as a company, they probably could have estimated, just like they do with my goddamn power, they could have estimated my monthly bill. They could have estimated how much capacity over so much time, how much, and knowing how much the valves were open and so forth and so on. They could have estimated billing. And to help prevent inciting panic, I hate to say it, the government would have made them right. Had they just shut up and talked to the FBI and been like, hey, look, this is what's going on. I really think that that's a scenario that could have worked, and they could have prevented so much. Yeah. And they could have prevented so much from knowing that the Russians were successful.
How much?
Just so much fail.
But then we wouldn't have the memes that we have today.
I know.
That's right.
I know.
Funny story. I did take delivery of my Tesla the week before that happened. I knew nothing about what was going to happen.
How much do we prevent now from knowing this story? So by having this story public as it is, right? How much future opportunities will be prevented?
Maybe some.
It sounds like they're scared and maybe moving on to other targets, or maybe shutting down that specific operation.
Well, it brought too much. I think that's the, ransomware is kind of interesting in that it's a very revealing attack. That was one of the nice things about stealing credit cards is you could do that in the shadows. When you're collecting a ransom, like you're putting yourself out there, and that's why I truly believe we see group personas come and go. It very well could be the same people behind the scenes, but they, I think, have a strategy where if it were me, I would just be burning down my infrastructure and starting over. Yeah, especially they've got the funding to do that. I mean, Colonial alone, they got $4.4 million. Sweet, burn it all down, rebuild it, go on vacation.
Rebuild it as some new name, and take a fraction, 200,000 of the 4.2 million that we got to rebuild new infrastructure to have some new ransomware under a new name, and run that out of Taiwan. Like, I'm in the wrong business. Seriously, I really am.
You're in the right business, on the wrong side.
See,
I think that's what you meant to say.
No, yeah, I'm in the right business. I'm on the wrong side. Absolutely. The problem is that it's not illegal until you get caught, right? And that's the scary part, is getting caught.
Then you're on the wrong side.
Then you're on the wrong side, and I don't look good in orange.
Orange jumpsuit.
No. So
that's if you even get one in international.
Just not my color.
You won't have any problems finding that USB drive, eh?
They'll know right where it is. What's that from? My friend from many years ago said it only hurts the first time, just like in prison.
That sounds like the end of the show or a segue.
Segue to something else.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to talk about protecting your Wi-Fi devices from the new frag vulnerabilities. If you look at what is this frag attack, you weren't here the week we talked about it, Larry.
No, and
therefore we didn't talk about it much. Just saying.
So, admittedly, I did not get a chance to delve into it super deeply, but I did get to have a brief conversation with Matthew about it. That's the amazing thing about our community is that so many of the folks that are like doing this huge, amazing research are still so approachable.
Right.
Like I share a Discord with Matthew.
And Matthew's the one that found it?
Matthew and his team.
Yeah.
You found it. Largely Matthew. Did a bunch of work for a number of years. He found it as part of his FragAttacks stuff. But FragAttacks took a different direction, and he had to put this by the wayside, and then went back to it and found it's fragmentation-based attacks for 802.11, just like we would see with IP. IP-based fragmentation attacks. You talk about overlapping fragments and fragments that are too long and too short. Very similar types of activities.
Fragmentation reassembly,
fragmentation reassembly, and some issues with encrypted networks that I don't quite understand yet, but just because I haven't had the time to delve into it. But Matthew is super approachable, and in fact, many folks took, as Matthew put it, his original article sort of out of context, and he published a follow-up with some more clarity. And I went through his article and said, hey Matthew, you got a spelling mistake on this part of the article. He's like, dude, I make that mistake all the time. And I'm like, dude, I make that mistake all the time. He spelled rouge. So.
Oh, geez.
So it wasn't frog instead of frag. Okay.
No, it was rogue instead. It was rouge instead of rogue. But he went on to explain further about some fragmentation attacks. And 802.11 fragmentation attacks are far from new. I mean, they're probably 10 years old.
So I think this is one we covered last week, and I saw in one of my Discord channels that Cedric Blanchard, the one that died in a parachuting accident.
Yep,
that was Cedric, right? He wrote Wi-Fi tap, and some of these fragmentation attacks were in Wi-Fi tap. Did I get that right? We're talking about the same Wi-Fi attack, right?
I think you're right. The other one too, amazing wireless researcher that I talked to about this attack was Joshua Wright.
Oh yeah,
and his comment was, "I have been talking about fragmentation attacks for how long?"
Yeah, Josh knew about this stuff too.
Yeah, and absolutely, we theorized about that in older versions of Sec 617. We talked about on day 6 when we didn't have a CTF about IDS and IPS and about how fragmentation attacks exactly like this could work. And as Wi-Fi evolved over the years, it's become more damaging. So interesting type of stuff there, and no disservice to Matthew for actually putting some of this stuff into application.
Well, it's certainly garnered a lot of attention. To attacks that maybe have certain aspects and other tools and stuff that we've theorized about. In the past. So
and now actually come to fruition, which is amazing. The other one that I think is a huge disservice to the community, and I'm going to call them out. There was a website called WVE.org, the Wireless Vulnerabilities and Enumeration .org, and it was a collection of.
There was a website.
There was an 802.11 collection of proposed, theoretical, and all sorts of CVEs for wireless, but it was wireless VEs, and it was purchased by HP.
It redirects to arubanetworks.com right now.
It was purchased by HP,
which Aruba was purchased by HP
at the time, and the entire contents of after a couple of years, the entire contents of WVE went away.
Oh.
And only a fraction of it is available via archive.org. To the point that there are attacks that we talk about in Sec 617 for doing denial of service attacks that will still work against WPA3 networks. That WPA3 networks have some protection against some denial of service attacks, but there are 3 that I can think of that are outside of the protections from WPA3 and were documented in WVE.
I remember WVE now.
And are gone.
I remember the backstory behind it now too.
Yeah, and are gone because they weren't captured by archive.org. And they exist in that class. And I've attempted to publish exploit code, and it's not good. I'd love pull requests. So, but they're still there and they still work.
Interesting.
Yep.
Hacking a Boeing 747.
Yeah.
Which is retired. In certain areas?
No, it's there's
I
didn't get the whole story. I didn't get the whole story behind.
Joff, you had a comment there?
Oh no, I'm just saying that retired. Maybe in the States, maybe in some richer Western countries, but they're still flying somewhere.
Yeah. So the big one that I got out of this is that they were allowed to publish this story about getting persistent access to the in-flight entertainment, the IFE, on some 747s, specifically because the specific IFE has been fully retired. Every aircraft that featured this IFE because of COVID and the reduction in fleet has been retired. There are no more of these in operation.
In the U.S. or in the world?
In the world. There are no more of these anywhere in the world flying.
Oh, interesting.
They were running on Windows NT 4.
Microsoft IIS HTTPD 4.0.
Yep. Yeah. And
talk about the Wayback Machine.
Holy crap! I remember that default page now too. They've got the default page that used to come up.
Yeah, but seriously, like you think about the longevity, like they retired some of these aircraft with these IFEs last year during the pandemic because there were so few people flying and that it was the time to reduce their fleet. Last year. Now, very much so in these cases that these weren't the new 777s with the whole fly-by-wire and stuff and firewalls, and these were systems that were fully disconnected, fully air-gapped from flight controls, and was confirmed to be so, and so forth. The part that I found that was absolutely fascinating about this story was that when they did the research, they were doing these researches, the research against the IFE on junked aircraft, like aircraft sitting in a junkyard.
Yeah.
And the only way to get power to the IFE was to power the aircraft at like $1,500 an hour because they had to pay for fuel for the on-ground generator, or you stood up, or you actually powered the aircraft with one of their turbines to produce electricity to power the aircraft. Effectively, what they ended up doing was they paid enough to get a copy of the OS so that they could reproduce it in the lab and not actually have to power an aircraft.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that they said that, like, they're running Meterpreter in Metasploit against it, and Meterpreter won't run because Meterpreter relies on C-script, and C-script is used for almost all versions of Windows. I'm reading from the article.
Except for this one.
Any Visual Basic, C# or other scripts can be created and then run C-script. However, NT4 doesn't include C-script. It included W-script, which rings a bell in a lot of the older systems.
Yeah.
So they couldn't get any of the payloads to work because the more modern payloads aren't backported to. Why bother backporting to NT4?
That's called dependency hell protection.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
I forget how they did something with hashes after that.
Yeah.
Which hashes on the NT4 were really heinous. That
just goes to show.
Landman? There was probably is that a Landman hash?
Yeah, that's Landman.
That looks
days.
like Landman, right? Has to be.
Landman days. Yeah, 2 7-character DES encrypted, 14 characters max.
Right, split
all uppercase.
7 and 7, right?
7 and 7. Yep.
Well, that's a throwback. Oh, the good old days.
What could possibly go wrong?
Right.
Like, you know,
so much easier than Kerberosing.
Oh,
it's funny the things that made that hack difficult, right?
Was it so old?
Because it's so old.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me dig up my
was the hard part.
Let me dig up my loft crack version 1.
Yeah, like that's becoming a thing. Like more and more, we're encountering like that one old system that is going to lead to complete compromise for some crazy stuff,
and no one has the tools that work. Because even like if you tried to run an older version of loft crack, it wouldn't run because it requires Windows 95.
and like that's one of the things too that some of the newcomers to the industry are like, oh, just run my PowerShell thing, and
no.
There is no
always going to work.
Nope. And that's one of the things that I'm finding interesting about doing the IoT course that we're writing, and we're
sometimes running old is protection.
Yeah, like
all these hipster hackers with their PowerShell.
Yeah, like
run NT4. Try that shit with me.
and I'm thinking about like some of these things that I'm talking about in the IoT class that we're working on. And it's, we're back to hacking like 1990s again.
Yeah, like Windows 3.1 for workgroups.
And like Linux.
3.11,
Linux,
baby.
Like, seriously, like we talk about, some of the password cracking tools that we use, and they expect a Etsy password and Etsy shadow file.
Yeah.
To crack passwords. And I'm like, no, some of these systems just use Etsy password. You don't need a shadow. Yeah.
And any user could read it, and it had the crypto passwords in there. Wow.
And they weren't salted.
Yep.
They're not salted.
But the tools that we have nowadays, they expect that, no, you're going to use Etsy Shadow and Etsy Password because
Right.
no one would be that dumb. Except
Then
for
you end up writing scripts to actually translate the old to the new so that you can use the new tools again.
Right.
Unshadow for the win. Like, oh, God.
Well,
Like,
because getting the older tools, like my example with Medusa, right? It's getting the older tools running is a huge pain in the butt.
yeah.
This
It
is
was
for
then,
VM.
and
Just
it
like
is
it
now.
was. Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
gonna say. Just like it was.
right? Like, yeah. Exactly.
It's funny. I'm going. I'm looking at my VMware Fusion output right now, and I'm looking at like, oh, I've got Sec 556 and a bunch of stuff, Windows 10 and Kali and Sec 617 and Windows 7. Wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
I have a Windows 7 VM, and for the longest time, I actually had a Windows 98 VM.
Mm.
I'm guilty. I've still got a Windows 7 VM.
You know why I have a Windows 7 VM? If you look at the preview, it has AVR Studio version 4 in the suspend screen, ready to click the button to be able to flash Zigbee wireless adapters with Josh's
Oh,
firmware.
that's awesome.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
the only thing I have it for.
We have to keep
In my
old.
case, I just have it. I just have it because you never know, and I've actually needed it.
Yep.
So
Terrifying.
You still find it on Pentest, Windows 7?
yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Not too often. It's just once in a while, but it's one of those, just like Larry was saying, it's one of those. Oh, that system over in the corner, we don't touch that because it's a special snowflake, and that's the one that'll take down the entire network.
Mm-hmm.
So
Is that running Windows ME?
No, Windows CE. You know what happens when you take Windows CE and you shorten it to WinCE?
No.
It describes the action you do when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
Wince.
Wince.
oh,
It's true. It's true.
oh God,
Oh.
please end the show now.
No, we still
last
have
one.
stuff to talk about.
One of the ones that I'd love to talk about is your
I know
story.
it's past your bedtime, Joff, but
It's your story number 21.
It is.
Paul, your story number 21. Did you read this?
Leaky John Deere's APIs. This was an awesome write-up,
Yes.
and I didn't get through the whole thing.
I did.
I kind of skipped around. I got to the part where they could do username enumeration on their API, and then I skipped over some amazing technical research that I probably should have read and went to the end and kind of glossed over it. And then basically it sounded like they pwned John Deere 6 ways to Sunday.
Uh-huh.
And at the end, they said suddenly they had a private vulnerability disclosure program. It did not exist when we started. 24 hours later, I received the invitation to the program. I was the only researcher in the program. The program was created that day. Every single asset had no bounty. The company does not allow public disclosure.
Yep. And
Oh, wow.
And
Not the way to do it.
And not only that, after the fact that the researcher said, yeah, thanks for the invite, but no thanks.
Yeah.
Boom, I'm going to go publish this stuff. I can't abide by these rules. So, yeah.
Well, John Deere's got a history,
Yep,
a
they do.
legacy around shady stuff.
Yep, like I wish Jack Daniel were here because total lack of right to repair, and that
Yeah, and he makes great cocktails too.
and
And
this
his
is
beard
true.
is really sexy.
This is
He
true.
really does.
Yeah, multiple things, and to the point that there's a bunch of Ukrainian hackers that have hacked the John Deere firmware for like $1 million combines, so that the purchasers of these combines can continue to run their operation and do the things that they need to do without the being locked into John Deere's services and so forth. And the stuff from Sick Codes is just continued
Continued highlight of
their failure to the point that they were able debauchery to the point that they were able to sign up for a developer access for John Deere. They figured out what some of the API calls were, then deleted all their cookies and found out that they could access the API without any authentication.
and hammered the API, and there was no rate limiting on it either.
Hammered the API with no rate limiting, and were able to discover usernames and no authentication. Then they were able to do also with no authentication if they had a VIN for one of the John Deere stuff, they could query the API and get location and registered owners and addresses and so forth.
That's
and
bad.
they were theorized like, no, that's the registered of the dealer. And no. You go and Google the addresses and they're farms.
Right.
Clearly farms with no API. Like, now you just start enumerating VINs. And the VINs weren't terribly complex.
Ooh.
And then they found that you could start modifying software and modifying firmware that you could send to stuff unauthenticated to their API so that you could push updated firmware to devices that weren't yours. That was my understanding of the article.
That is a new
Whoops.
definition of harvesting accounts.
Yeah.
Yes. And
What could possibly go wrong?
And they disclosed to CISA effectively that like this could very much affect
Disrupt the supply chain.
disrupt supply chain, disrupt production of critical assets.
Food?
Yeah. And then John Deere went and said, hey, we got a vulnerability disclosure program. And they went and looked and they're like, oh, yeah, submit to our HackerOne thing by this email at johndeere.com. So they went to HackerOne and they're like, they don't have a disclosure program. And then later on, as more research progressed, I'm like, oh, yeah, they got a vulnerability thing. And as you described, yep. Tons of models, no bounty, no public disclosure.
That's just
Yeah, that's lawyers. Oh God.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, that's just like no visibility or influence of security on any of their developers in the business.
And admittedly, they found as part of with the folks that founded sick.codes and their team there, they found multiple issues that they reported over multiple times, and the first one that they found was 72 hours that they took to fix it. The username stuff. Like,
that's just the tip of the iceberg. It sounded like that.
And it was like, that's cool. Why didn't you tell me you fixed it? Like, that's awesome, but your developers went silent after I reported it. Yeah. Dirty tricks.
Well, hopefully this shines a spotlight on it.
Yep.
But the spotlight's shined on them for stuff like this in the past.
And that said, thinking about the future, I really hope that, one, this encourages companies like this to do better security audits and understanding the way folks will interact with all of their services, and put a better light on how they choose to deal with the community. So
I when you see stuff like this, it strikes me that it's such an opportunity, right? Because the right way, in my opinion, to do it is just to be upfront and say, okay, look, guys, mea culpa, we need help. I'm coming to the information security community. We're going to do this, and this, and just be really open. We want to hire a team. We want to turn this thing around, right? And it's just make it a promotional opportunity, right?
Yeah, but you also have to have the resources on the back end job to fix these problems, and that doesn't mean developers. That means buy-in from the whole company, right? Like, everyone's got to get behind.
It's a business decision, right? It is a business decision, without doubt.
Yeah.
But that decision, and what I'm trying to illustrate, is an opportunity. It really is. Especially today with such visibility into information security issues today. I mean, like never before. We used to bemoan this, even as much as 2-3 years ago. But now, there's been some really high profile things. It's like, it's an opportunity.
I want to transitioning to container image scanning is not doesn't make a great transition. Security by design is more of a better transition, because what's the incentive, right? I think that's a question we're asking with John Deere. What's the incentive for John Deere to take security seriously, fix their vulnerabilities, honor their customers' right to repair, and some of the issues that have been brought up? And Google's launching this new program that they're calling Security by Design. So they launched the Security by Design on Google Play Academy to help developers identify, mitigate, and proactively protect against security threats. The Android ecosystem, including Google Play, has many built-in security features that help protect developers and users, and the course is an introduction to app security best practices. But again, my question is, what's the incentive? It's great that Google's making this resource available, but why would people use it? Why wouldn't they just go on creating really crappy Android apps that I either choose not to install on my phone or I delete very quickly when it asks for permissions to everything?
Or not, depending on how bad you really want the app, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or I need the app to do something.
Which story was this of yours?
My story number 2.
Story number 2. Okay, yep.
And so container image scanning, this is really awesome, simple little tricks. So this was, there are lots of solutions, open source and commercial, that implement container image scanning, right? Find vulnerabilities inside of your container. And some of these tricks are kind of interesting. So you can, in your container build in your Docker file, do you run apt-get removed apt and just remove apt altogether? And that way, when the container image scanning tries to use apt to get a list of packages in their versions, it will fail.
But then you also have to remove the apt-get.
That might remove both.
I don't know.
That's a good question.
I've never tried to remove it because I need it.
Well, you should. I typically have left it there because I don't run my containers as root, so you don't have permissions to run it anyhow.
Yep.
And if you're privilege escalating within a container, you're going to get root on the. You're usually privilege escalating from a container into the host, and just running stuff on the host as root.
Yep.
So whether my container's running as root or not doesn't matter if I compromise the host. So that was kind of, I thought, a neat little trick. But also, if you know exactly where and how the runtime scanner binary gets injected, find a way to prevent it. So there's one called microscanner that adds a binary at /microscanner. So what you do is, in a prior layer, you symlink /microscanner to dev null, so that when it gets copied in at the next layer, it doesn't really work. And so the scanner never gets deployed, right?
I like that.
Pretty.
That's kind of fun.
That's
the author did a great job of thinking like a true hacker. Joshua Stutz is the author of this article. It's a 5-minute read. Really cool, kind of neat container tricks.
This goes to one of those controls where you need confirmation that the control ran.
Yes.
Right? Like it's...
is my stuff running?
Dude,
antivirus.
Like containers has your problem with the Stream Deck written all over it. You have Stream Deck issue a curl command to a Docker container. The curl command finishes, the Docker container continues to run your command.
That's kind of where I was going too. Like, how could I run a command that spawns something off?
Yep, like curl is a great one.
Right.
So me using a Stream Deck, I have a couple buttons on my Stream Deck that issue a curl command. And it's a curl command to an ESP8266 that does some physical function.
So it's a web app.
It's a web app.
And the web app can take that request. The original process dies, but the web app keeps running.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just need a web app on my script. That's doable.
You can even run that web app on the same local host.
Or I could just catch the request with a Python web server.
There you go.
Yeah. So Joff, that was your project you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, quite a while ago now, but there's plenty of Python code that you could apply to that, without a doubt.
Effectively getting that command to execute without inheritance, and you got to pass it to another process.
It's just a web request, right? Yeah.
It's literally in my case. It's literally it's a script that has wget in it that does a wget to a web server that web server knows how to perform a command.
You're basically building a C2.
Yeah.
So it's a reminder back to something that's a principle that we see abused in information security all the time, and that is whenever there's an interface from one system to another, whether that's a Docker container to another Docker container, whether it's inter-process communication, whether it's network communication between system A and system B, that opportunity for abusing trust boundaries always exists.
Yeah.
And if people don't properly secure those trust boundaries and trust nothing, essentially,
zero trust
in their coding, then you're going to have opportunities there. I mean, I love the suite of Java deserialization, for example, vulnerabilities that still exist to this day, where you can just create custom Java objects for anything that accepts network sockets and deserializes Java, and just accepts objects like openly. I mean, that stuff's all over the place to this day. I mean, just all over the place.
There was a really interesting survey of cybersecurity leaders and how they lack basic cyber hygiene. Now, this goes back to the cobbler and his children's shoes analogy. And it says 48% of cybersecurity leaders use their work computer to log on to social network platforms. Well, yawn. Yeah, I'm like, really? Like, how is that interesting? 77 are willing to accept connection friend requests from unknown individuals. Like, seriously? Like,
especially on LinkedIn.
Well, wait a minute. We are humans as well.
Right.
So, okay, how's that? I'm sorry. I mean, actually, LinkedIn is a really good example, Larry, because all of us here on the show have certain public presence.
Sure.
And we get a lot of LinkedIn requests. And I do follow kind of a mental algorithm when I'm looking at them. I kind of look at country of origin. I look at the connections. I look at the
recruiter
mutual friends. I look at the recruiters. Where do I want to accept them in or not?
Do they work for a client? Have they been in one of my SANS classes?
Growth lead experts. There's a lot of those on LinkedIn.
But that gets tough after a while. I mean, there's thousands of people now that are in my quote-unquote network. It does get more difficult. Right?
And the other interesting one from the SANS perspective that I find that is very interesting is that at end of class I say, hey, reach out. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. Find me. Go do some OSINT. I'm also on LinkedIn. And all of those are really easy to find me in some variety of form.
Yeah, I mean the OnlyFans is my favorite.
I don't even I don't even pretend.
I
don't even pretend that I'm not findable. Right? I mean, I know there's people in our industry that try to keep a really, really low profile. But that is totally not us, right? Any of us.
Yeah. And so two things. I find that Europeans will absolutely reach out via LinkedIn. Like Europeans, Asia Pacific, LinkedIn is the way to connect. Paul, thank you for being a pro subscriber to my OnlyFans.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the support.
How does that tie back to LinkedIn again?
It doesn't.
I don't know. I'm confused now. I'm so confused.
Yeah, I don't know what this article was trying to get to. I mean, I think a much better way to spin that was if you want to use social media, how do you protect yourself, right? Like, we as cybersecurity leaders, like, we're gonna, as Larry said, like, we use social media. The more interesting aspects is how we use social media and apply some rigor, protections, screening, that kind of thing, right?
I think us in particular, I just don't think we have a good position in this discussion, right? We're just more public than most other people.
Arguably, Joff, that whole public figure thing. And, for how many years did we accept, Twitter followers and follow everybody back? And I've literally stopped following folks back just because I can't keep up with the volume, which may hurt me in the number of Twitter followers that I get. And for many years, it was that we accepted so many Facebook friend requests. And I knew you managed, Paul, I know you managed that differently. The interesting one that I'm finding lately over the last 2 months is that the algorithm on Facebook for which posts I see has changed significantly, in that I would always see posts from many people. And now I'm starting to see posts like, who the fuck is this person? They're on my friends list, but I haven't seen a post from them in 4 years.
I think they're kind of doing more round robin than they used to.
No, they are.
Yeah, the algorithm is just
The algorithm has
I think
changed.
it's grown to the point where there is so much AI and ML in the algorithm that is trying to make decisions that it's just always making the wrong decisions. It's like grown to the point where it's completely useless.
Yeah, it was
Okay,
too specific.
so what we're saying is Facebook is now psychotic. Excellent.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, to the point where at Facebook, I'm like, I just go in the groups that I want to get the information that I want to get. Some of that cybersecurity. I join some groups that like for my e-bike and stuff. And like I get really good tips from people that have the same e-bikes. I'm like, I didn't know like if I have that problem, like that's how you fix it because someone posted it in a group. That's the only value that I'm getting out of Facebook. The feed is completely useless because as Joff, I think you're right. It's fucking psychotic right now. And Twitter is just like such an echo chamber, and just there's so many users
Twitter's
now.
a dumpster fire.
Yeah,
man.
it's a dumpster fire. It's like a gigantic dumpster fire.
Well, let's put it this way. My order of priorities is that I do Facebook and I look at a bunch of those groups that I'm a member of, and some of those groups are amazing.
Memes is the only reason I use Facebook.
Puns, shaggies, you name it. But there are some real communities that I'm a member of that are like, you go into some community and like you post something like you're a dumb motherfucker and like
there's a lot of out of control groups.
I think I've found a number of groups for stuff that I'm interested in that are like, you post any of that stuff that's negative, you're out.
Yeah.
And like a bunch of amazing groups. So like that's my Facebook.
I was like, and then if my pedal assist ever breaks on my e-bike, I'm like, I know how to fix it now. I'm like, that's cool.
Yep.
Thanks for that.
And like, so many things like that, and I get exposed to so many things via Facebook groups that are good communities.
Yeah. What do you get out of Twitter? I don't know. Not much.
So I've been surprised.
My level of social media interaction is Facebook, Instagram. I don't follow a ton of people on Instagram. Instagram stories, Instagram feed on my 2 accounts, and then both of them are pretty limited, so I like can catch up pretty quick. And then Twitter. Twitter is my last be sitting there, it's getting to bed. I need to relax a little bit. Okay, I'll check Facebook a little bit. Groups, blah, blah, blah. Great, done. Instagram. Yeah, okay, caught up.
What about LinkedIn? You read your LinkedIn feed?
What's LinkedIn?
Yeah, I don't get any value out of the feed. And I think, each of these platforms has the ability to instant message and direct message. And I'm just like, look, if you want to chat with me, Discord's it. Like that's where I've gone. So like I check social media a little bit here and there, and then I'm like, you want to have a conversation? Like find me on Discord. Like because I can't keep up with all the different platforms.
Yep.
Having said that, I have to say that outside of the borders of the United States, LinkedIn is actually pretty valuable.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have noticed that in my own private class outreach, that LinkedIn is a pretty effective tool.
Absolutely.
For that.
I wish someone would make a tool like an autoresponder for Facebook message, Twitter message, and LinkedIn. I don't know how you'd direct. I guess it would be directed by like autorespond. Like, hey, here's my Discord server. You want to chat with me? Here's where it's at. And like the people that really want to chat with you are going to find you. The people you really want to chat with are on a private Slack somewhere.
Yep. So that said, which Discord server am I going to chat with you on, Paul?
I don't know. We're on like probably at least 6 or 7 mutual.
That's a challenge. I've got so many Discord servers.
I'm going to find out right now.
How many Discord servers are we on together?
Tying this back to a conversation earlier about that Like War book. I don't know if you guys read that, but it's one of those things.
You're having a useful conversation now, Paul. That's not where we're at the end of the show.
We are on 3.
Only 3.
Only 3.
Not too
Sorry,
bad.
Paul. I'm just busting your balls.
No problem.
Security Weekly, Black Hills Information Security, and Trusted Sec.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, you're not in the... All right, we'll chat after.
Yeah. You'll invite me.
We'll have to.
I'm participating in like 8 different Discord servers minimum right now.
Dude, you don't want to see my Discord stuff. It's 1, 2, 3,
It's nuts.
11, 12, 16, 17, 18, 19,
Actually,
20.
we've got to the point where we
13.
started to
I'm at
we
25.
started to stand on it like regular expressions. Your new lifestyle that I just did. We stood up a Discord server for it, and it works really well. But that's one more Discord server.
It's weird to watch the conversation kind of trickle on when it comes to Discord, right? You go to event, there's Discord, and then it like trickles to nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't know. I kind of feel like with Discord there should be less servers and more channels. You know what I mean? Like funnel someone to like a security conferences server that we manage, and then have different channels for things. I think people are, because it's so easy to spin up a new server. And it's like, oh yeah.
So my server.
But like you said, Paul, then there's no conversations after that like event happens.
Or like with B-sides, I'm actually seeing some of those conversations pick back up as we're getting closer to the this year's B-sides event.
So it's very
kind of nice to have that history from last year too.
Right.
Yep. So I'm on 24 different Discord servers. A bunch of them in folders, a bunch of folders muted.
Me too.
And to the point that
mute's good.
like I think about two of them that I'm a member of that are like that. One is the Adafruit Discord server. That's muted all the time, and I go there and I do something if I have a problem with something Adafruit that I'm dealing with. The other one is Adam Savage's Tested. Like, there's some amazing stuff in there, but the volume is staggering. Thousands of messages a day. And ideally, I signed into Adam Savage's Tested server was to get the one channel, the YouTube feed. And I found out just subscribing to his YouTube channel
does the same thing.
It does the same thing.
A lot of redundancy.
And in fact, was better that way. And muting a bunch of servers, and I find that there's some that are partially muted. Like, I don't read the stuff, and I just go and mark all as read in a folder type of thing. But
I have my one for the family. And I try and get my kids on it, and it's largely for like when they game and stuff. And I call it the Armenian Assassins.
Nice.
That's our family Discord server.
Nice.
Paul, I got one too for the same reason. It's like the family gaming server.
Yeah, I got to get them just like more using it regularly, because it'd be a great way to get in touch with them, because they don't answer their phones.
Yep.
Especially when they're gaming. I'm like, can you keep Discord running so I can bug you? And then I think they leave it off so I can't bug them while they're gaming.
And the fun part this episode has been great is that our 13-year-old daughter has been getting into gaming and wants to do the whole social media, Discord, Twitch stream of her playing games.
You mean she, like my son, doesn't just create a Facebook account and doesn't tell anyone?
Oh, no, she doesn't do that. She's smarter than that. She's asked, and she's gotten permission because she knows that we'll know everything that she's doing. But she has a Twitch account. She has Discord account. And the irony is, until she was called downstairs for dinner, she was listening to the Twitch stream of this show.
Nice.
And we're friends on Discord. We don't share any servers that are in common. Maybe that will change.
Yeah, you gotta have a family Discord. It's fun.
But the sad part is it would just be me and her on the family Discord.
Yeah.
Because the 7-year-old is too young to do Discord. Like, she wants to text us both. And not just yet. Your spelling is a little bit... can be approved. And my wife is like, I'm upset.
Dis what?
Yeah. Yeah, a Discord? Yeah, that's what I do when I'm upset. Type of thing. And everybody else in the family... Yeah, my sister-in-law would be the only other one that is technology advanced enough to do Discord, and gaming is not her thing, which is what Discord was targeted at, although they're trying to change that.
Yeah, they are. Which I think is a good thing.
Yep. So,
all right, now I think it's time to end the show.
I agree.
Hey, thanks everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
Over and get the hell out of here.